So flow enables successful transformation and scaling. Flow in its DNA is ultimately a leadership framework, and the leadership frameworks go directly to mindset. And if you're not helping people adapt and adopt a new mindset and actually be able to use it in their daily work, then your scaling efforts are probably going to go off in the weeds and not deliver what the organization was expecting. The leadership takeaways for this video, we're going to look at some final thoughts on key responsibilities for executives governing agile organizations, and we're also going to start to now get into prioritizing epics and knowing your velocity. There's agile methods and practices for that. There's elements of enterprise flow, scaling agile, flow work streams and cadences, and things like that. We're going to look a little at agile PMOs because not everybody uses scaled agile methodologies. They may be using something closer to PMI type project or program management offices that have slowly been going from traditional format to agile format. And so I've got a couple slides in here about how to do this with a vision-driven portfolio. And also a side note, Scrum and Agile teams need to be persistent and dedicated. I know that's not always possible, but when possible, that's the best way to do that. I've worked with organizations where the team members are split between 2, 3, 4 different projects. By the time you split a person's time into 4 projects, you don't get 25% of that person's time for each project. You'll be lucky to get 5% for each person's project. And this is one of the key reasons why companies have such a hard time getting things done. Then we're going to look at reporting upstream. I'm sharing some real world examples for the burn-up charts, the team health checks we use, and then a little bit more about pursuing transformation excellence. This is at least the third time you're seeing this slide, but it's slightly different each time. We've already been through vision and culture. I hope you've got a good grasp on why those are important by now and why it's important to have a good communication flow via cascading vision down through the organization and linking back up and using one thing concepts, both going down the organization cascade and linking back up to the level above each and every individual team and so on. In these following slides, you're going to go through how to prioritize and how to understand your organization's velocity. And there are a ton of slides here. It's a lot about measurement. It's also a little bit about scaling and some of the methodologies. And again, we're going to get much deeper into this when we get into the transformation slide deck. It's going to be really tough coming up with flexible KPIs and being able to baseline it, because if you don't sort your teams into persistent dedicated teams, you're going to have a horrible nightmare trying to measure and baseline anything. So you're going to have to make compromises. You're going to have to look at, okay, do we baseline and measure programs against each other? And Agile purists would say, well, hey, you're not supposed to compare teams to each other because one program's team composition may not be anything like another program's team composition. So the best thing that you can do is measure the the program itself, and over time, after 5, 6, 7 increments, product increments or program increments, however you want to measure that, you need to have a way that you can actually be able to measure the teams. And we have various ways of doing that. and we get into that in other parts and in other presentations. You'll see the measurement part pretty well outlined in the transformation video series, and I believe we touch on some of it in this video series as well. This is the 11th annual survey, State of Agile, from Verizon One. And when you're looking at this and you go, okay, it's about 68% if you look at the amount of Scrum and the Scrum hybrids. It's 68%. If you added Scrumban into that, it becomes 76%. As I mentioned earlier, it's anywhere from 70 to 75%. So that's right on target. As far as what is being used, where you could say it's Scrum. And so the Agilists, they want it to be less focused on Scrum. So I think that this is a little bit misleading, the way that these are presented, but it gives you an idea of what's out there and what's being used. I think right now we're on the 13th annual survey. And in that one, it was 72% was the total for Scrum, Scrum Hybrid, and Scrumban. So the numbers are pretty stable. And, you know, what's really humorous for me is the 2% that don't know. It's like, seriously, you're doing Agile and you don't know what it is? Okay, cool. Or maybe they're doing it in a homegrown way that they don't know what to call it, or it doesn't have any specific labels. So the elements of enterprise flow include simplicity, clarity, focus on vision at every level, the ability to prioritize, and that includes the executives getting in there and helping do the prioritization for their portfolios, including the programs in those portfolios and all the projects or teams that are working in or with those programs. It needs to be visible. You need to have the rooms, the agile rooms, where you can put things up on the wall, make it big and visible. If you don't have that, you need to come up with a way that you can do that. I've seen a lot of clever ways that companies try to do that. If you're relying on tools, you are also going to introduce potential errors into the system, and things can get missed and dropped. You want to focus on doing short cycles and small batch sizes. When you do the exercises with us, you're going to do something called the penny game, and that's going to drive home these 2 points very, very well. We need to be aware about the intrinsic motivation and how to help people actually transform and get the mindset that they need to have. And then the decision making and governance needs to be moved to the lowest possible level within the organization. And that also is going to require change that many organizations are unwilling to make. This is the scaling methodologies, and in the 13th annual, one more has popped up as a scaling methodology called the Spotify model. The agile coaches that I've met at Spotify, many of them say that it's the Spotify's, it's not a model. Okay, did you get that? It's not a model. And some of these things, like a Scrum of Scrums, in this one, Scrum of Scrums is not really a scaling method. I guess it could be considered an approach, and that's probably why they're using the word approach. But many of the companies that are using Scrum of Scrums quickly find out that it doesn't achieve what they thought or wanted to achieve using it. Right now, Scaled Agile framework is the big one, and I think in the latest 13th annual, they're up to about 29%. In any case, it's the 800-pound gorilla of scaling. Agile purists tend to hate things like SAFe or less, which is large-scale Scrum or Nexus or DAD. I keep chuckling whenever I see RAGE. Recipes for disaster. Oh, no, sorry. Recipes for agile governance in the enterprise. Just doesn't sound good to call it RAGE. Agile portfolio management or agile program management. You've got lean management. There are more than one way to get this done at the program and portfolio level. And remember, those are in the two right-hand boxes in the 4 lenses on transformation. For the work streams and cadences, every company has its governance that it's doing. And if those are quarterly meetings, they may have a list of items that they have to do at those meetings. They may have a list of portfolios, they may have a list of programs, they may have a list of projects that they're going through. And if you've got a project backlog, it needs to be prioritized, and you need to have leadership to choose what things are going to go first. The Agile Transformation Group should be there helping everybody increase their competencies and skills. Okay. And typically you'll have some kind of agile transformation team or agile transformation group that's working with getting everybody trained and helping them get the tool sets and mindsets that they're going to need in order to succeed. And that should be at a pretty high level in the organization, almost probably should report to the C level. The PMOs, or PMO, depending on if you have a single or multiple. If you have an enterprise PMO, they need to be able to help the multi-team project management and product development in the programs be able to smoke out cross dependencies and integration items. They should be able to provide the tool sets that make sense for your organization, and they should also be able to help in sorting everyone into persistent, dedicated teams. But you're going to need the line managers to do that as well. So it becomes very complicated very quickly. And the PMOs, they typically have a monthly reporting cadence out to the projects and teams and upwards to the executives. And then they have a quarterly cadence that aligns with the governance and portfolio level. For your agile PMOs, they need to focus on vision. They need to have clear definitions, distill clear agreements, have clear short plans and timeframes for delivery, and drive to success with frequent communication. This is an example of a more traditional PMO setup where you have the teams and the tactics down at the task level, projects and processes or products at the next level up. Not every company uses projects anymore for sorting out all the different work. That's the people level. You'll see that we're using the VSPT here. For programs, that should be the strategic the strategic level, how you're going to implement your strategies. You're going to use programs to do that. Portfolio should include the vision level, and each of these levels needs to link up to the one above and link to the overall vision and strategy. And again, you're going from more abstract further up in the organization, more concrete as you're getting down to the team level. So this is a way to look at VSPT and bring it down from vision and strategy, which are pretty abstract, to people and tasks where you're doing concrete work that can be measured. So your Scrum teams need to be persistent, dedicated, time-boxed, perhaps, and You could have Team A working for Program W, Team B working for Program X, Team C working for Program Y, Team whatever working for Program Z. And then as they complete the projects, you just assign the next project to them as you're moving across. And so this was for a time frame during 2018, helping a customer understand, okay, we've got these 4 teams, they're working on different programs, and here are the projects that they're going to be working on during this part of, or this half of the year, roughly almost, for 5-6 month time frame. Here's the projects that they're going to be working on. For the reporting upstream, I prefer burn-up charts as compared to burn-down charts. Most executives are going to want to see burn-up charts because they don't like to see graphs that are pointing downward, because that usually means they're losing money. So they like to see graphs that are going upwards. And the reason that I really like burn-up charts is then I can put a t-shirt sized estimate of the backlog above it, and by doing trend lines, I can start to predict when either a project or a program is going to be completed. We use team health checks, radars, the AHA curve, the flow friction analysis for reporting upstream. We still use product roadmaps for reporting purposes. We'll use the PMO biweekly meetings or monthly meetings, depending on how the organization's set up. And then for the ATG, the Agile Transformation Group or Agile Transformation Team, you would have monthly meetings for the senior executives involved in that team. And then you'll have quarterly meetings that involve everybody, including the C-suite. And so there's a double cadence there for that. And here's some real world results. And we're going to go through this pretty much area by area. It's good to remember that your team burn-up charts or burn-down charts are basically for team use only. They're not really for the managers, and you have to train your managers, look, this is to help the teams improve, and we really don't need your help in that area. We don't need your support in that area. And if you read these, then you need to read them over time and in context before you guys start to having any kind of feedback or input to the team burn-up charts. But in general, the team burn-up charts are for team use only. It's to help them improve, to get better sprint by sprint by sprint. Okay. Where it gets interesting for the managers and line managers, program managers, portfolio directors, managers, and above to the C-suite are these 3 graphs that I have over here in the other 2 boxes. You have a program level report that's project by project, and then the program level report that is consolidated for all the projects within that program. And then the portfolio becomes a consolidated view for a specific portfolio for the organization. Now, this slide is very similar to the last slide, except that in the project program corner up here in the corner, typically product is what we would have there. I just wanted to highlight that I added a couple extra things in this upper right corner. One is the program product owner board, and that's really the release roadmap. And it gives you a chance to look at cross dependencies, integration items, and it gives you that bigger picture, longer release view. And this is something that the Scrum Masters, Agile coaches, product owners, product managers, and even enterprise Agile coaches will help you do. And so you'll notice that we had this product owner board, and then the product roadmap, and then how are we reporting this over a number of sprints for the particular project or development effort on which we're working. So this is more or less the same as the last slide as far as the reporting items go in the three boxes, whether it's the current sprint, over sprints over time, or projects completed. It's the same idea. And so we're just consolidating the pictures as we go. But we've added a few additional items in there in order to help the teams and the stakeholders and everyone in the process. They can walk up to it, they can look at it, and they go, oh, I get that. That's awesome. And so this is just a way for us to be able to make it big, make it visible, and make it so that we can talk to each of those tools with the stakeholders in a way that they look at it and go, oh, I get that. So it's a very useful communication tool, probably a better practice or good practice heading towards best practice. And almost without exception, I use all of these days as an enterprise coach, working with the agile coaches and scrum masters, product owners, and all the other stakeholders. So I just wanted to include this and just let you know, hey, there's even more in the background than what we're showing in this particular presentation. So this is an example from real world. We changed the names and what the projects were and things like that. And you can see that we had gotten pretty good. This was after, I think this was 2012 reporting. This was just for team use, but we were able to get a pretty good feel for the size of the backlogs based on the product backlogs created in the workshops with the teams. And we would plot day by day how the team's doing, and we could watch to see did their backlog grow a little bit during the sprint as they got better at estimating the size of the work that they were doing. It might have taken them a few days to realize that, oh, this that was 8 points was actually 35 points or 30 points or whatever. And well, using the Fibonacci, it would have been a different size, but it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, they realized that a couple of the items were bigger than they thought. And since we were using 2-week sprints, and we were looking at, okay, what's the daily velocity after like 3-4 days, and the line was predicting that, oh well, we could potentially end this sprint 2 weeks early, but you could see that the line was actually starting to flatten out. And on this one, it ended up being an S curve, and they delivered right on time. Now, the project was also tracked on a sprint by sprint basis. And on a sprint by sprint basis, if you know the total size of the backlog for what's going to be released for a specific project, after 5-6 sprints, you're going to have a relatively accurate picture on whether or not they're going to make it within X number of sprints. And for this one, it looked like 20 sprints, which was almost a full year's worth of effort for this project. And you can see that they were estimating that they were going to end potentially a sprint or two earlier than what they had planned. But you could see that on a sprint by sprint basis, this team was consistently delivering the points and a certain amount of points that they put on the board. And so this is a tool for the product owner and for the program managers to be able to report back up to the executives, here's this project, here's what's happening, and here's a potential date for when it will be complete. Now you'll notice that I don't do 3-point estimates. Personally, I think that's extra overhead that's not necessary, because the problem is that the executives tend to be over optimistic, and if you give them the most likely date, the best case, and the worst case, they're gonna go to best case, and then all of a sudden you're getting pulled towards a delivery date that might or might not actually be achievable. And so I don't like doing that. I think this is more transparent and more real. And anyways, on a sprint by sprint basis, you can see if this line's moving up or down. So if the couple sprints before the line had been slightly lower, which it looks like it would have been, that means that if the line's going up, then you can see, oh, the team is actually accelerating a little bit, and it appears that they've created a sustainable velocity. And the bump that you see there that has come back down, either they decided to remove some items from the overall backlog that were no longer relevant, or they realized that they had missized, that they hadn't sized the backlog items correctly, and so they were refining and getting a better feel for how many points were actually in the backlog. So the upper line can move, but it gives you the idea of what we're shooting for from having not a perfect, but a relatively good way to be able to predict outcomes. Okay, that doesn't mean it's going to happen that way, but it gives you at least a tool to be able to say, oh, well, within a range we could hit this for this project. And really that's all the executives want and need. Now, for the program level, what we did is we did a backlog of the projects. And so we have a project backlog with all the projects in that backlog. And you can see that on this particular portfolio, for this particular program, that they started out with 10 projects in the portfolio. But because of the velocity of the team and how quickly things were being completed, the executives said, oh, okay, well, we can move 6 or 7 additional projects into this portfolio because it looks like the team could actually achieve that. And again, this one turned into an S-curve, and the team actually delivered the 17 projects for 2013, because you could see that all of a sudden their velocity had increased quite dramatically during vacation time, during June and July. So they were planning well, they were ready to deliver for the fall, and the picture of this one at the end was really good. This one is the portfolio prediction. So this was comparing 2011 in the green to what we were shooting for 2012. And by the time you get to the end of the year, you know if you're going to be delivering all of the projects and programs in the portfolio by the end of the year. And so this one, it ended up being, they hit 98 projects, even though in October it looked like they could have hit 100. A couple of the projects didn't come in, okay? But the next slide is where it gets really interesting. Because in this slide, we look at, okay, where did we start? We started, and the lines aren't perfect, but we started at about just under 60 projects a year, 58. And that was their numbers for 2010. 2011, we hit somewhere around 72. That line's not quite in the right place. 2012, we hit 98. And in 2013, which is that upper black line, we hit 124. So we more than doubled the throughput of the projects in the organization in 2.5 years. And what's interesting is when we started with all of this, at the end of 2010, they had over 260 projects in their project backlog list, which means that at 58 a year, they had almost 4.5 years worth of work that they needed to deliver. 4.5 years. Now, if you add up the 72, 98, and 124, I think you come up to 290 something for the 3 years. So basically what happened is we were able to deliver not just the 260 projects, but we were able to deliver 30 additional ones by the end of 2013. which means we moved up the budget years. We saved over a whole year of budget for 250 people. Do the math. For the 18 agile teams, which is what I counted in the book, we counted it as 18 million. But we didn't count the cost for the other 70 people that were working with those teams that were coming from marketing and operations and things like that. So that was a pretty significant amount of money. It was probably closer to $27 million that were saved of budget. And so the company was able to get more work done, twice the work in half the time, just like Dr. Sutherland and Ken Schwaber have said in their books. It's just like what they're talking about, and it works. And this worked, and we were able to get this done in 2.5 years instead of the usual 5 to 7 years for a transformation, because we applied the principles of flow and we applied it consistently and with intention to watch what it would do and to prove that, yes, flow really works. And so this became one of the case studies that's in our book, and it's just one of many case studies that we have where over and over and over again we're able to create compressions of time. And by being able to get out to the market quicker, I'm sure we increased revenue. We definitely saved them about $27 million in cost. And we definitely mitigated and got rid of risk along the way. So all of this works. It works flat out. We use different types of health radars. Sometimes we make our custom ones. In the transformation deck, I share pictures of that. We've actually done custom radars for Agility Health Radar for Flow. We just haven't taken those out public. They probably need to be honed based on our latest findings and learnings. But the idea and the concept is there. And these are extremely useful for measuring the health of individuals, teams, programs, and even portfolios. Which is what I'm demonstrating on this slide here. That the picture that you see in the left on the team level, that's a team level radar where you can measure how is the team doing, and there's ways to read that, and it's a very powerful tool. And then we would use the flow radars for the product and portfolio parts of the transformation boxes. So when you're thinking about transformation and the pursuit of excellence has to happen everywhere in all 4 boxes at the same time if you're ever going to have the hope of transforming your organization. We put some fun pictures here on this slide where you've got the at the individual level, it's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And you'll see the guy there with the halo, and it's sort of like, what does my family think that I do at work? And so these are the individual tasks and things that I get done each day. If you have ever worked with a team and you're a team level facilitator, you feel like the plate spinner at the circus, and you're juggling not just the team's needs, you're juggling the needs of the stakeholders and a lot of people in the organization. So if you're able to keep the plates going, the longer and faster that you can have those plates going, the higher the odds are that you're going to succeed. Now, when you get into agile coaching, which is one step up from the Scrum Master that you saw there in the lower left corner, up in the upper right corner, When you become an agile coach, there's that expectation that you're going to be able to part the waters and lead the people through on dry ground. And so you're going to have to raise your game to a much higher level in order to be a good agile coach. When you get to enterprise agile coaching level, that's when you become an agile superhero and you're able to break through the barriers in the organization and knock down the silos and really help the organization to make the changes that they need to make in order to be able to succeed. This is the recap for this section. And as I'm looking at it, I realize that it's almost a half hour long, so I know that that's pretty brutal. On the longer videos, you can always just pause and take a break if you need to take a break, either at 10 or 12 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever works for you. We went through some final thoughts on the key responsibilities for execs. How to prioritize epics and how to understand your velocity. Talked a little bit about agile PMOs and how to report upstream. This first application is probably the toughest question for most organizations. Begin to think about how your organization can create persistent teams. Might happen at the program or product level rather than at the team level. And by the way, specialists, they may be part of multiple teams anyways, but you need to think about how to get those persistent teams, and then you need to begin to think about how to measure your results, because ultimately you get what you measure.